I'll never forget the way the candlelight flickered across her face when she said those words. We were sitting at the most expensive restaurant in the city, the kind of place where they don't even put prices on the menu. And my wife Sarah looked at me with eyes colder than the ice sculpture behind the bar. "I never should have married you," she said, loud enough for the couple at the next table to glance over. My hands were shaking as I reached for my water glass, not because I was angry, but because somewhere deep inside, I knew this moment was going to change everything. What she whispered next, as I started to stand up, would haunt me for months. "You'll never be the man I thought you were." She had no idea what that night would set in motion. But let me back up for a second, because you need to understand how I got to that table in the first place. My name is David. And 3 years before that night, I was a different person. I was a guy who believed in working hard, providing for his family, and doing the right thing even when no one was watching. I met Sarah at a coffee shop where I was working as a manager, not glamorous but honest work. She was a paralegal at a downtown firm, ambitious, beautiful. And when she laughed at my terrible jokes, I thought I'd found my person. We got married within a year. And for a while, everything seemed perfect. I worked 60-hour weeks at that coffee shop, eventually getting promoted to district manager, overseeing 5 locations, bringing home decent money, enough for a nice apartment and occasional date nights. But somewhere along the way, Sarah changed. Or maybe I just started seeing who she really was. Her friends were all dating doctors, lawyers, tech executives, guys who wore Rolexes and drove German cars. Meanwhile, I was the coffee shop manager husband, the one she'd introduce with a tight smile at parties before quickly changing the subject. I noticed how she'd compare me to her friend Jessica's husband, who just made partner at his firm, or to her cousin's boyfriend, who launched some crypto startup. "David's doing great in retail," she'd say, and somehow she made retail sound like a disease. I told myself it didn't matter, that she loved me for who I was, but the truth was eating away at both of us, one small comment at a time. The dinner that night, that cursed dinner, was supposed to be our 3rd anniversary. Sarah had insisted we go to Luminaire, this 5-star French place that had a 6-month waiting list. I'd saved for months to afford it, skipping lunches, taking on extra shifts, because I wanted to make her happy. I wanted to show her that I could give her nice things, that I was working toward something bigger. When we sat down, she was on her phone immediately, texting someone and barely looking at the menu. "The Hendersons are at Nobu tonight," she said without looking up. "Kelly says the omakase is incredible." I ordered wine, trying to make conversation about maybe taking a vacation, maybe going somewhere we'd always talked about, but she just nodded absently, her attention somewhere else entirely. The waiter came, this polished guy in a perfect tuxedo, and took our orders with the kind of reverence people reserve for religious ceremonies. Sarah ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, some duck preparation that cost more than my car payment, and I ordered the steak, mid-range, reasonable. That's when she looked at me, really looked at me for the first time that evening. "You're getting the cheap steak?" she asked, her voice just a little too loud. "On our anniversary?" I felt my face flush, felt the eyes of nearby diners turning toward us. "It's not cheap, Sarah," I said quietly. "It's a good cut." She laughed, but there was no humor in it, just this sharp, brittle sound that seemed to echo off the marble floors. "Everything with you is good enough, isn't it? Good enough job? Good enough apartment? Good enough life?" I should have seen it coming, should have recognized the signs that this night was heading somewhere dark, but I was still trying to salvage it. I reached across the table for her hand, but she pulled away like I'd burned her. "Sarah, what's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice low, trying not to make a scene. She took a long sip of her wine, the expensive Bordeaux I'd ordered to impress her, and when she set the glass down, her eyes were different, harder than I'd ever seen them. "What's going on is that I'm tired, David. I'm tired of pretending that this is enough." I'm tired of watching my friends live actual lives while I'm stuck with someone who thinks managing coffee shops is a career. The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing with precision, and I felt something crack inside my chest. I work hard, I said, and I hated how defensive I sounded, how small. I'm building something. The company is talking about a regional position. It could mean a significant raise. She waved her hand dismissively. Like I was a waiter she was trying to send away. A regional position, she repeated, mocking the hope in my voice. Do you know what Jessica's husband made last year? $300,000. $300,000. And you're excited about maybe, possibly, getting a $20,000 raise if you're lucky. I felt the people at the next table go quiet, felt their discomfort radiating toward us, but Sarah didn't care. She was just getting started. My mother was right about you. She said you were too comfortable being mediocre, that you didn't have ambition. But I defended you. I actually defended you. The food arrived then, placed in front of us by a waiter who clearly sensed the tension and couldn't escape fast enough. My steak sat there, perfectly cooked, garnished with things I couldn't even name, and I couldn't imagine taking a bite. Sarah cut into her duck with aggressive precision, like she was angry at the plate itself. This duck is incredible, she said to no one in particular. Probably the most expensive thing you've ever bought me. I put my fork down, my appetite completely gone, and I felt something shift inside me, something fundamental. This wasn't just a bad night, wasn't just a fight between married people who'd lost their way. This was her showing me exactly what she thought of me, what she'd maybe always thought, and I was done pretending not to see it. Sarah, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. But why did you marry me? She looked up from her duck, a piece of meat halfway to her mouth. And for a second I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Maybe regret, maybe recognition of how far she'd gone. But then it was gone, replaced by that same cold certainty. I thought you'd grow, she said simply. I thought you had potential that you just needed someone to unlock. But you're the same guy you were 3 years ago, 5 years ago, probably 10 years ago. You're stuck, David, and I'm not going to be stuck with you. The couple at the next table was definitely listening now. Probably everyone within 20 feet was listening, and I didn't care anymore. I was beyond embarrassment, beyond shame, into some new territory where clarity burned away everything else. That's when she said it. The words that started this whole story. I never should have married you. She didn't whisper it, didn't try to soften the blow, just stated it like a fact, like something everyone already knew. The restaurant seemed to go quiet, or maybe that was just in my head, but I heard her perfectly, heard every syllable. I stood up slowly, carefully folding my napkin and placing it on the table beside my untouched steak. David, sit down, she hissed, suddenly aware of the scene we were making. You're embarrassing me. I almost laughed at that, at the absurdity of her being embarrassed when she'd just spent the last 20 minutes systematically destroying me in public. I'm leaving, I said quietly. Enjoy your duck. As I turned to walk away, she grabbed my wrist, her nails digging in hard enough to hurt. She pulled me down slightly, her lips close to my ear, and whispered the words that would echo in my mind for the next 3 years. You'll never be the man I thought you were. You're going to spend the rest of your life being nobody, doing nothing, and I'm not wasting another day watching it happen. Her breath was hot against my ear, her voice filled with a certainty that shook me more than the public humiliation had. I pulled my wrist free gently, looked down at her one more time, and walked out of that restaurant into the cold night air. Behind me, I heard the murmur of conversation resume. Imagine people talking about the couple who'd had such a dramatic fight, wondered if any of them had any idea what they'd just witnessed. I walked for hours that night, just walked through the city streets with no destination, my mind replaying everything over and over. The thing about rock bottom is that it gives you a strange kind of clarity. When you have nothing left to lose, when someone has stripped away all your illusions about your life, you can finally see things as they really are. I wasn't angry at Sarah, not exactly. I was angry at myself for accepting so little, for thinking that being comfortable was the same as being successful, for letting fear of failure keep me from ever really trying. I'd played it safe my entire life, taken the steady job, avoided risks, convinced myself that security was the same thing as happiness, and where had it gotten me? To a table at an expensive restaurant where my own wife told me I wasn't enough, would never be enough. I went back to our apartment at 2 in the morning and started packing. Sarah wasn't home yet, probably still at the restaurant, or maybe she'd gone to a friend's place. I didn't know and didn't care. I took my clothes, my laptop, my few personal items, and I left. I texted her that I was staying with my brother for a while, that we needed space, that I needed to think. She texted back immediately, "Fine, maybe you'll finally grow up." I turned off my phone and drove to Jake's place across town. My brother took one look at me and didn't ask questions, just handed me a beer and showed me to the guest room. "Whatever happened," he said, "you're going to be okay." I nodded, but I didn't believe him. How could I be okay when my whole life had just collapsed? The next few days were a blur of lawyer consultations, paperwork, the mechanical process of dismantling a marriage. Sarah wanted the apartment, wanted half of everything, wanted me to sign away rights to things I didn't even remember owning. I gave her most of it without fighting. She could have the furniture, the dishes, the life we'd pretended to build. I just wanted out, wanted to be free of the constant reminder that I'd failed. My boss at the coffee company was understanding when I asked for a leave of absence, said I could take a month to sort things out. But sitting in Jake's guest room, staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning, I realized I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to spend the next 20 years climbing a corporate ladder that would never satisfy someone like Sarah anyway. That's when I remembered my grandfather. He'd died when I was 15, but I'd loved him fiercely. Spent summers working at his small grocery store in our hometown. He used to tell me stories about building that business from nothing, about understanding what people needed and being there to provide it. "Retail isn't glamorous," he'd say while restocking shelves, "but it's real. You're helping people live their lives, one bag of groceries at a time." I'd forgotten that lesson somewhere along the way, forgotten that work could be about more than just a paycheck and benefits. I started researching, spending 16 hours a day on Jake's couch reading about grocery store operations, supply chains, demographic trends, everything I could absorb. My brother thought I was losing it, processing grief in some weird way, but I was more focused than I'd been in years. There was something happening in the grocery industry that most people weren't talking about. The big chains were getting bigger, pricing out competition, but they were also getting more impersonal, more focused on profits than people. Meanwhile, small neighborhood stores couldn't compete on price. But there was a gap, a space for something in between, a local chain that felt personal, but had the buying power to offer competitive prices. I saw it clearly, could visualize exactly how it would work. I spent weeks writing a business plan, mapping out locations, calculating costs down to the penny. I had $30,000 in savings, money I'd kept separate from our joint account, and I knew it wasn't nearly enough. But my grandfather had taught me that sometimes you have to bet on yourself, that the biggest risk is never taking one at all. I started calling everyone I knew, pitching my idea. Most people were polite but skeptical. "Grocery stores are brutal," they'd say. "The margins are razor thin. You'll be competing against Walmart." But a few people listened, really listened. Jake believed in me, invested $10,000 of his own money. An old friend from college, Marcus, who'd done well in tech, invested $50,000. My former district supervisor, a woman named Carol, who'd always said I had more potential than I was using, invested $25,000 and agreed to consult. Slowly, painfully, I cobbled together $200,000. It wasn't enough to compete with the big boys, but it was enough to start small, to prove the concept. I found a location in a neighborhood that was on the edge of gentrification, where young families were moving in, but there weren't many good grocery options. The space had been a failed electronics store, needed massive renovation, but the rent was reasonable. I spent 3 months doing much of the work myself, painting, building shelves, learning plumbing and electrical because I couldn't afford to hire out everything. Jake helped on weekends, and Carol connected me with suppliers who were willing to take a chance on a startup. I called the store Cornerstone Market, named it after my grandfather's old place. The concept was simple: quality products at fair prices with actual customer service, where employees knew regular customers and names and would help you find anything you needed. Opening day was terrifying. I'd invested everything I had and everything people had trusted me with, and I had no idea if anyone would show up. But they did. The neighborhood responded to something real, something personal in an age of self-checkout machines and anonymous warehouse stores. We weren't the cheapest, but we were good value, and we treated every customer like they mattered. I worked 100-hour weeks, was there when we opened at 7 and when we closed at 11, learned every aspect of the business from the ground up. And slowly, steadily, we grew. After 6 months, we were profitable. After a year, we were thriving. That's when I started thinking about expansion. The model worked. I'd proven it. And there were dozens of neighborhoods just like mine all over the region. I took out loans, brought in more investors, found partners who believed in the vision. By the end of year 2, I had 3 stores. By the end of year 3, I had 7. Each one was slightly different, tailored to its neighborhood, but all following the same philosophy: quality, service, community. We weren't just selling groceries, we were becoming part of people's lives. Customers would tell me stories about how they'd watch their kids grow up shopping at our stores, how our employees had become friends. We were building something bigger than I'd imagined, and the growth was accelerating. I hadn't thought about Sarah much during those years. I was too busy building something real, too focused on proving, if only to myself, that I wasn't the person she'd said I was. We'd finalized the divorce after a year, split everything down the middle, signed papers that made our failure official and complete. She'd remarried quickly, I heard through mutual friends, some guy who worked in private equity, made the kind of money she'd always wanted me to make. I was happy for her in an abstract way, hoped she'd found whatever she was looking for. My life had moved on, transformed into something I barely recognized. I was dating occasionally, nothing serious, too focused on the business to invest deeply in anything else. But I was happy, genuinely happy, maybe for the first time in years. Then came the night that brought everything full circle. I was at a charity dinner, one of those events where successful business owners gather to network and write checks for good causes. Cornerstone Market was up to 15 locations by then, doing over $50 million in annual revenue. And I'd become someone people wanted to meet, wanted to pitch, wanted to be associated with. I was standing by the bar, talking to a potential investor about expansion opportunities, when I saw her. Sarah was across the room, looking exactly as beautiful as I remembered, wearing a dress that probably cost more than I used to make in a month. She was alone, scanning the crowd, and when her eyes landed on me, I watched the recognition hit her like a physical blow. She made her way over slowly, and I could see her mind working, trying to figure out what I was doing there. "David," she said, like she wasn't sure it was really me. "Sarah," I replied, keeping my voice neutral, professional. How are you?" We made small talk, the kind of careful conversation divorced people have when they're trying not to touch any wounds. She told me about her husband, the house they'd bought, the life she was living. I listened politely, offered appropriate congratulations. Then she asked what I was doing, and I saw her face change when I told her about Cornerstone Market. "Wait," she said, interrupting me. "You own that. I've seen your stores everywhere. I actually shop at the one on Maple Street." There was something in her voice, something I couldn't quite identify. Surprise, certainly, but also something else. "I had no idea that was you," she continued, and I could see her doing calculations in her head, reassessing everything she thought she knew. "You've done really well for yourself." I shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "I got lucky, found something that worked." But she was shaking her head, looking at me with an intensity that made me want to step back. "No, David, this is incredible. 15 stores, that's not luck. That's real success." We talked for a few more minutes, and I mentioned I had to get back to my table, needed to give a speech about community investment. As I walked away, I felt her watching me, felt the weight of her attention in a way that used to make me feel inadequate, but now just felt sad. She started texting me after that night. At first, it was casual. "Great seeing you, we should catch up properly." Then it became more frequent. "I was thinking about that night at Luminaire. I said some terrible things." Then more direct. "I made a huge mistake, David. I didn't see what I had." I didn't respond much, kept my answers brief and polite. I wasn't angry anymore, wasn't interested in revenge or vindication. I'd moved past that, built a new life that didn't include her, but she was persistent, kept reaching out, and finally suggested we meet for dinner. "Let me apologize properly," she wrote. "Please." "I need you to know how sorry I am." Against my better judgment, maybe out of curiosity about how I'd feel seeing her again, I agreed. We met at a different restaurant this time. Nothing as expensive as Luminaire, but nice, comfortable. Sarah arrived early, was waiting at the table when I got there, and I could see immediately that something was wrong. She looked thinner, more tired, like whatever life she'd built wasn't sitting quite right. We ordered wine, made awkward conversation about nothing important, and then she said what she'd come to say. "I was terrible to you, David. I was cruel and shallow, and I threw away the best thing in my life because I didn't understand what mattered." Her voice cracked slightly, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. "I destroyed us because I cared more about appearances than actual happiness. And now I'm stuck in a marriage that looks perfect on the outside but feels empty every single day." I listened, let her talk, let her apologize and explain and cry a little. Part of me, the part that had loved her once, felt sorry for her, understood that she was genuinely struggling. But another part of me, the part that had been forged in those 3 years of building something from nothing, knew that this wasn't about us anymore. "Sarah," I said gently, "I forgive you. I mean that. I'm not angry. I don't hold on to what happened. That night at Luminaire was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, even though it didn't feel like it at the time." She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes, and I knew I had to say the rest before she misunderstood. "But I can't have you back in my life. Not because I hate you, but because I've become someone different. Built a life that works for me. And that life needs to be surrounded by people who lift me up, who believe in what I'm building, who add positive energy. We're just not those people for each other anymore." She started to protest, to argue, but I held up my hand gently. "You deserve to be happy, genuinely happy, with someone who gives you what you need. But that person isn't me, not anymore. Maybe it never was. And we were both just trying to force something that didn't fit. I hope you find it, Sarah. I really do. But we both need to let go of this completely and build the lives we're actually meant to have." She was crying openly now, not dramatically, but with a quiet sadness that I recognized. The grief of losing something you can't get back. We finished dinner making small talk, carefully avoiding any more heavy topics. And when we said goodbye outside the restaurant, I knew it would be the last time we'd see each other like this. 3 months after that dinner, I opened my 20th store. The business was booming, expanding into new territories, and I was negotiating with investors about franchising the concept nationally. I'd hired a management team so I could step back from day-to-day operations, focus on strategy and growth. I'd started dating someone seriously, A woman named Lisa who ran a nonprofit and understood building something meaningful. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, built on my terms, reflecting my values. I thought about that night at Luminaire sometimes, remembered the feeling of walking out into the cold with my world shattered. If someone had told me then where I'd be 3 years later, I wouldn't have believed them. The truth is, sometimes the worst moments in our lives are actually doorways to something better. Sometimes we need to hit bottom before we can finally push up toward the surface. Sarah humiliated me, stripped away my illusions, forced me to see that the safe, comfortable life I'd built was actually a slow death of potential. I'm grateful to her for that now, even though it hurt worse than anything I'd experienced. She showed me that I had a choice. I could accept her definition of who I was, spend the rest of my life being good enough, or I could bet on myself, risk everything, and see what I was actually capable of building. I chose to bet on myself, and it made all the difference. Looking back, I realized that success isn't really about money or status or proving anyone wrong. It's about becoming the person you're capable of being, about pushing past fear and comfort to discover what you can create when you stop playing it safe. Cornerstone Market isn't just a chain of grocery stores. It's proof that I was more than anyone believed, including myself. It's proof that the quiet, reliable guy managing coffee shops had something bigger inside, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And that moment, as painful as it was, came at a luxury restaurant when my wife told me I'd never be the man she thought I was. She was right, but not in the way she meant. I wasn't that man. I was someone better. I still drive past that restaurant sometimes, Luminaire with its fancy awning and valet parking. I never go in, don't feel any need to reclaim that space or make some dramatic gesture. It's just a building, just a place where one chapter of my life ended and another began. The real victory isn't in showing Sarah what she lost, though I won't lie and say part of me didn't feel vindicated when she reached out full of regret. The real victory is in the life I built afterward, the business that employs hundreds of people, the communities we serve, the knowledge that I took my worst moment and transformed it into something meaningful. That's success in a way that no amount of money or status could ever match. So if you're going through something similar, if someone has torn you down or told you that you'll never amount to anything, I want you to hear this. They're probably wrong, but they might also be giving you exactly what you need. Sometimes we need someone to push us off the cliff before we realize we can fly. Sometimes we need to lose everything comfortable before we're willing to risk everything important. My wife humiliated me at a luxury dinner, and I walked away. What I built next changed everything. Not because I wanted revenge or vindication, but because I finally stopped accepting good enough and started reaching for extraordinary. And if I can do it, starting with nothing but $30,000 and a broken heart, then maybe you can too. The last time I heard about Sarah, through mutual friends who probably shouldn't have told me, she'd gotten divorced again. Her perfect life with the private equity husband hadn't worked out, apparently. They'd split up over differences that sounded familiar. Different values, different priorities, different definitions of what mattered. I felt sad for her, hoped she'd eventually find whatever she was looking for. But I didn't reach out. That door was closed, had been closed since that final dinner when I told her I forgave her but couldn't have her energy in my life. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Some people are meant to be lessons, not lifetime companions. And Sarah was my biggest lesson in becoming who I needed to be. These days, I wake up early, not because I have to, but because I want to. I visit my stores, talk to employees and customers, stay connected to the business that changed my life. I work with Lisa on her nonprofit projects, combining our resources to make a real difference in communities that need it. I call Jake every week, thank him for believing in me when no one else did, including myself. And I live in a house that I built, not to impress anyone or prove anything, but because it's exactly what I wanted. It's not the biggest house or the fanciest house, but it's mine, earned through work I'm proud of, surrounded by people who add value to my life. That's what success actually looks like. And it took me 32 years and one devastating dinner to figure it out. So when people ask me about my success story, about how I built Cornerstone Market from nothing into a regional powerhouse, I always tell them the truth. I don't sugarcoat it or make it sound easier than it was. I tell them about Sarah, about that night at Luminaire, about walking out into the cold with my marriage shattered and my confidence destroyed. I tell them about the 3 months I spent on my brother's couch, about the 100-hour weeks, about the moments when I was sure I'd fail and lose everything. But I also tell them about the other side, about what's possible when you stop accepting other people's definitions of who you are and start writing your own story. Because that's what this is really about. Not revenge or vindication or proving anyone wrong, but proving yourself right. Proving that you were always capable of more than you believed, and all you needed was the courage to try. And if that courage comes from someone telling you that you'll never amount to anything, well, sometimes that's exactly what you need to hear. My wife humiliated me at a luxury dinner. I walked away, and what I built next changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone who believed in me along the way. That's a success story I'm proud to tell and a life I'm proud to live. The rest, as they say, is just details.